having a good time abroad. I was suddenly called back urgently by a phone call. My parents came to pick me up in person. The moment I got off the plane, my dad shoved a piece of candy into my mouth. "Son, we've found you someone to marry." I pulled out a tissue and immediately started spitting it out. Then my mom gently tapped me back with one finger. I chewed the candy slowly, then gave a lazy grin. "Come on, Mom, what family's Omega? Maybe I've already dated someone like that." My dad chuckled with a warm smile. "Not an Omega, this is an Alpha. Anthony's beloved grandson. And the son of my best friend Luna, Mason. Oh no, this one just got out of a relationship." After getting into the car, my dad kept talking nonstop. "Do you remember Mason? When he was little, you used to avoid playing with him because you thought he wasn't smart. Kept calling him stupid dog all the time." "I didn't." My dad let out a long sigh. "He really is different now." "What?" I nearly shouted, my voice cracking. Mom gave me a sharp look. "He's not dead, he's just changed. Don't go making all that noise." From what Luna told me, Mason was heartbroken after a breakup 2 months ago. His friends dragged him to rock climbing in the wild, and then a falling boulder hit his head. He was unconscious for 2 days. When he woke up, his speech became unclear, and he wasn't himself anymore. Neurologists from both domestic and international hospitals joined together in treatment for over a month, but there was no improvement at all. Anthony's health had already been poor. This news made him so distressed he nearly passed out. As soon as he regained consciousness, he started worrying about Mason's future, saying his time is limited and hoping to see Mason get married before he goes. But he liked a photo I posted on my social media just 2 days ago. Mom gave me another sharp look. "Are you giving me trouble just because he's using his phone while lying in bed?" "I'm not that bold." My mom huffed, then continued, "Mason's in this condition now. He needs to marry someone he truly knows." After thinking it over, "Your Luna thought of you and asked you to help her with this." My dad took over. "Son, don't worry. Your Luna said it's just to fulfill the old man's last wish. Once he passes on peacefully, you and Mason can decide whatever you want." I rolled my eyes. "Do you think Mason would agree to this? He doesn't really remember you anymore." "Huh?" My mom sighed. "When your Luna brought you up." He paused for a while. Then she showed him your photo. He took some time before finally saying 3 words. "What?" "Samuel, bad." I asked him what you did wrong, and he shook his head. "Then you showed him your photo again and asked if he wanted to marry you." He nodded. "I guess he must have remembered how you wouldn't play with him when you were little." I lowered my head and rubbed the tip of my nose. Mom suddenly turned serious. "Why are you acting guilty? Did you really do something wrong to Mason?" I snapped my head up. "No. Me and him, we haven't talked in ages." Mom studied me for a moment, then finally looked away, picking up her phone as she said, "Then it's settled. I'll call you back later and set up a time for you to meet Mason." That afternoon, I didn't go home. My mom just dropped me off at a hair salon. "Turn that white hair of yours back to normal. Mom, this white gold just died half a month ago. I don't care what kind of gold it is. And take off those earrings and collar right now." I didn't even look back as I rushed toward the salon. After some discussion, I stubbornly kept a few streaks of gradient color at the ends of my hair. It was exactly 6 o'clock when I finished. Just as I stepped out of the salon, Mom showed up again. "Come on, let's go eat dinner." I made a long face. "Mom, I'm really tired. I've been tired." Mom shot me a glance. "You never complained about being worn out when you used to work during the day and DJ at night. Don't think I don't know what you're up to, going off with your old crowd again. Samuel, I never stopped you before when you were out having fun. But once you get married, you'd better straighten up and come home right after work. And I raised my hands in surrender. My mom paid no attention and kept talking all the way to the dining spot. It was a high-end hotel's scenic restaurant. Even though I'd prepared myself mentally, I still paused for a moment when I saw Mason. Mason had lost some weight. The sharp and intense eyes he once had were now much clearer, with a soft, dreamy glow. To be honest, it was kind of cute. After greeting Luna, I walked straight toward Mason. I casually plopped down into the seat beside him and grinned widely. "It's been a while." Mason sat up straight, giving me a restrained glance before managing 2 words. "Hi." This reaction. Could he really have forgotten our talk? As my mom chatted with Luna, I reached out and rested my hand on Mason's shoulder, lowering my voice. "Why did you agree to marry me?" Mason went completely rigid. His head slightly lowered as he spoke blankly. "Grandpa likes you. Mom likes you." I gave his shoulder a light tap. "But what about you? Do you like me?" Mason's dark eyes shifted slightly, his gaze briefly touching my face before he spoke in a softer tone. "Not really." That answer was almost worse than no answer at all. "Fine, next question. Why do you keep saying bad things about me?" This time, Mason looked straight at me, speaking clearly and evenly. "No, not good." I raised an eyebrow and asked with a smirk, "How am I not good? When we were together, what did I ever fail to do for you?" Mason frowned, his eyes filled with worry. "Take it slow, and say it." Well, just hearing the words together made him completely flustered. I changed my question and slowed down my pace. "Why do you think I'm not good?" Mason pressed his lips together, looking stubborn and unwilling to cooperate. I gently grabbed the back of his head and warned, "Spit it out, or I'll kiss you right in front of your mom." Mason's eyes widened in shock. After a long silent protest, he finally spoke up, pouting, "You play with others but not with me, and you don't come home after dark." Well, those 3 things rarely happened during our relationship. From that, I can tell Mason's memory of me is stuck before we started dating. Back then, I really did have a wild streak. Staying out all night was normal for me. But how exactly did Mason even know about that? I reached out and gently turned his face toward me. "Are you keeping an eye on me, honey?" Mason's eyes widened in shock again. He quickly pulled his hand away, clearly annoyed. "Get serious. What kind of nonsense is that?" Well, he's acting childish now, and his temper's worse than ever. The next day, I went to visit Mason's grandfather at the hospital. As soon as we met, the old man asked me why I had dyed my hair black again. I gave my mom a wistful glance, then turned around proudly to show off my colorful hair tips to the elder. The old man laughed so hard he couldn't stop, and even encouraged me to get Mason to try it too. I looked at Mason, who was staring at the ceiling, playing deaf. After leaving the hospital, I guided him into my car. Mason clung to the door, resisting. "No, go." I grinned and leaned in close. "Going to get married? Not going?" The stubborn one gave up, sat quietly in the car, and started fiddling with his fingers. After dinner last night, Luna quietly told me that we wouldn't have a wedding. Just getting a marriage certificate would be enough to satisfy grandfather. It's easier for me to get married again later if I ever want to. Mason's expression right now is exactly the same as it was back then. I'm not sure if he even heard me. We arrived at the registry office and got our official documents in under 10 minutes. After we left, I pulled out the 2 rings I had prepared earlier, first slipping one onto Mason's finger, then putting the other on my own. Mason kept his eyes fixed on his ring finger, as if deep in thought. I snapped my fingers to get his attention, then handed him the 2 documents. Then I pulled out my phone, hooking one arm around Mason's neck while tapping to start recording with the other. On screen, Mason looked completely still, almost as if he were being forced. I gently tugged on his cheek. "Smile a little, dear." As soon as I spoke, Mason's expression in the lens flickered with shock, confusion, and embarrassment before he slowly turned his head toward me, dazed. The shutter clicked, freezing the moment in place. In the photo, I was smiling brightly. Mason, holding up 2 small red booklets that just covered his lower face. Only his eyes visible, his lashes lowered slightly, gaze fixed on the curve of my lips. Well, at least it looks like he's deeply fond of me. I sent the photo straight to my social feed. Grandfather was the first one to like it. Then, a string of question marks appeared in the comments section. I tucked my phone into my pocket and tugged gently at Mason, who stood there like a wooden post. "Let's go." Mason blinked his eyes, wide and curious. "Where to?" I tugged gently on his tie and gave a mischievous grin. "Let's go home." After spending a day together, I realized that Mason might not be very sharp, but he still understands quite a bit. He knows what marriage means, so he turned red the whole way home, didn't let me hold his hand when we entered, and even chose to sit as far from me as possible during dinner rather than risk reaching for food. He doesn't feel like he's become foolish at all. It was as if he'd lost the maturity and composure expected of an adult, and the part of him that couldn't hide his feelings had taken over. We've been together for almost a year now. Only now did it hit me. I hadn't truly understood him at all. This relationship, I've handled it really badly. At 10 o'clock that night, Mason came out of the bathroom after his shower. Seeing me sitting on his bed, he stepped back 3 times in shock, his face tight with warning. "You shouldn't have any improper thoughts about me." I raised an eyebrow and set down my phone. I glanced him over from head to toe, then asked slowly, "What exactly do you mean?" The boy turned bright red, gripping his waistband tightly, and snapped at me, "You're trouble." I paused for a moment, narrowing my eyes at him. "Go ahead, say it again." Mason stuck out his chin, his expression both defiant and nervous, and said it once more. I nodded with a smile, slowly walking toward him. Mason gripped the waist of his pants, standing straight without stepping back or turning away. But as soon as I lifted my hand, he quickly shut his eyes. Scared of getting hit? Mason stayed silent, stubbornly squeezing his eyes even tighter. I let out a soft laugh and gave him a gentle kiss. After I settled into bed comfortably, I ended up lying awake for half the night. I found myself thinking about my relationship with Mason. We met again at a formal gathering. He had been pursuing me for nearly half a year before we started dating, and we were together for about a year. But it was him who ended things. It was just an ordinary morning. He prepared breakfast as usual and watched me finish eating before he finally said, "Samuel, we should break up." I still remember his expression at the time, calm and composed, as if he'd carefully thought it through for a long while. Just last night, he had called to remind me to watch how much I drank at the gathering. I looked straight at him and asked for his reason. In the silence, I imagined all sorts of answers, like, "I'm tired," or "There's no spark anymore." Even something like, "I found a suitable partner to marry." But then he said, "Let me give you your freedom back." I just stared at him, speechless, and walked out slamming the door. It was my first time being broken up with. I felt really unsettled inside. I went wild for 2 months, but still couldn't shake the feeling. It wasn't until I heard from Mason again and saw him face to face that I finally understood what was wrong. I still missed him. I had planned to talk things through with him properly. But he just went ahead and reset himself completely. No second chances. No turning back. That was harsh. He didn't even leave me a chance to change my mind. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Just as I was fuming in silence, a faint sound came from the door. Then there was a soft click as it closed. The tall, stealthy figure appeared in my room. "What are you doing?" Mason pouted. "Sweetheart, hug me." I let out a half smile. "First, answer one question for me. Why did you warn me not to have any improper thoughts about you that night?" Mason was at a loss for words. I raised my finger. 3, 2. Mason quickly grabbed my hand and curled it into a fist, holding it tightly in his palm as he spoke with urgency. "Because you don't like me, and I don't like you either." I frowned. When did I ever say? I stopped mid-sentence. Mason's memories were stuck before we started dating, and during that time, I truly didn't have feelings for him, and I had someone else I was close to. That explains it. I lifted my eyes, softened my voice, and spoke slowly. "So that night at dinner, when I asked if you liked me, and you said no, was it because of this?" Mason lowered his head and gave a soft I tilted my lips upward and gently lifted his chin. "So now, I'll ask again. Do you like me?" Mason nodded firmly. "Yes." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "When did you start liking me?" Mason pressed his lips together lightly. Really long ago." I fell silent. So he'd had a crush on me even before that fake drink? "Mason. You've had a crush on me all along, haven't you?" Mason frowned, and I thought I'd caught him off guard, but he just gave a quiet, Now it was my turn to frown. "If you've had feelings for me this whole time, you should have been unwilling to let go. So why did you break up so easily?" "Honestly, during our relationship, I never treated you badly, did I? What were you really thinking?" Mason held his breath and widened his eyes, filled completely with confusion and disbelief. I let out a sigh and rubbed my forehead lightly. Forgot again. His mind had already erased that memory. Does this mean I'll never get an answer? Just as I was feeling disappointed, Mason took my right hand and pressed it against his chest. "Believe me." I froze for a brief moment. Then I burst out laughing, teasing on purpose. "What if I don't like you? Would you still like me?" Mason was taken aback. "You've already kissed me." I played it serious. "So what? Kissing you and liking you are two different things. Now hurry up and answer." Mason looked utterly torn, his brows knitted tight, and after a long pause, he finally spoke. "Then I'd only give you a little bit of liking." I reached for my phone on the nightstand, which was buzzing with messages almost to bursting. Just after replying to Christian, Mason suddenly came over again, trying to get my attention. Honey, look at me, look at me, look at you, please." Before I could finish speaking, I realized something was off, and gently pressed my fingers against his jaw. "You're speaking more clearly now? Say one more thing. I'd like to hear it." Mason looked at me, slowly blinked twice, and a soft smile spread across his face. Honey, I really like you so much." I gave a small, knowing smile, listening to his words. Walking into the living room, I saw Mason locked in a quiet stare-off with his personal doctor. Mason spotted me first and excitedly patted the seat beside him. "Darling, come over here." Meanwhile, Matthew looked up at me with a calm and composed expression. I gave a faint smile in response. Then I turned to Daniel and asked, Matthew, I've noticed his speech has become much smoother lately. Maybe it's just my imagination. Could you take a look? Matthew nodded. Indeed. When the young master described your situation to me, he used mostly longer sentences with clear logic. Much improved compared to my last visit. Really? I felt a surge of excitement. What about his mental state? Do you notice any changes? Matthew paused for 2 seconds, glanced at Mason, then looked back at me. The young master has become much more lively. Clearly, that wasn't the answer I was hoping for. After a brief pause, I looked toward Mason. Honey, I'm feeling a bit hungry. Would you mind going to the kitchen to warm up some milk for me? If you don't know how, just ask the housekeeper. Sure. After watching Mason leave, I turned to the one across from me. Matthew, you've been involved in young Master Mason's entire treatment process. Given how he's changed today, do you think there's a chance he might recover? Matthew paused for a moment, carefully choosing his words. Samuel, may I ask what you did with the young master yesterday? Just helped him revisit some things we used to do together. Matthew nodded. Samuel, our medical team has tried numerous approaches for the young master's slow mental response, but none have worked very well so far. The fact that he's shown this kind of improvement today is truly unexpected. You may continue with your own method for a while longer, but please be prepared. Things might get better, or they might not go anywhere at all. Before he could finish speaking, Mason walked in empty-handed. I hadn't even had a chance to ask when he grabbed my hand and stood up. Honey, I asked the housekeeper to prepare something different. Come on, let's go to the dining room. I raised an eyebrow and glanced at Matthew, giving a small smirk. How did it end up empty? I swear I still managed to get something, didn't I? Matthew, how about we grab a bite together? Mason's smug grin suddenly disappeared. No way. It's not for you. Go home. Matthew smiled. Yes, sir. After napping for a bit in the afternoon, I got ready to head to the office. I brought Mason along with me, mainly because when I came out after changing my clothes, I saw him sitting quietly on the sofa, looking at me with hopeful eyes. Suddenly, I felt a soft warmth in my chest. Without a second thought, I decided to bring him along. When I got to the office, it felt like I'd accidentally walked into a wedding celebration. Flowers, balloons, and large red wedding characters were everywhere. Just about to call cleaning staff to come fix the place, the office door swung open. Christian walked in with a playful grin. Serper ISE. He suddenly grabbed me and gave me 2 hearty slaps on the back. Turns out, the one who always claimed they'd never get married ended up being the first to tie the knot. Pushed him away. Got someone I really connect with, so I got married. You got a problem with that? Christian wore an exaggerated expression, as if he'd just heard something hilarious. Someone you really connect with? Aren't you the one who said you never go back to old relationships? Back when you were off enjoying yourself abroad, your ex showed up again and donated money to our company. I had a meeting scheduled with him this afternoon to go over the plan. As soon as he arrived, he asked to see you right away. I told him you were on your honeymoon. His face dropped instantly. Both the client and creative teams have been working with him for nearly an hour now. Wanna pop in? Might seal things up right there. I don't even know what project this is about. I'd just be saying random things if I went. Besides, I grabbed Christian by the collar and turned him toward the side. Your family's right here. Do you really think that's appropriate? Mason was lounging casually in his office chair, one arm resting loosely on the armrest. The thing that stood out most His expression was unusually cold. Christian had no idea Mason was acting strangely. He let out a surprised, "Oh," then gave an awkward smile and politely said, "Mason." But Mason didn't react at all. He just narrowed his eyes slightly. "Don't call me brother. I don't have a sibling like you." I was briefly taken aback. If it weren't for the pause in Mason's speech, I might have thought he'd finally come back to normal with that icy expression of his. Christian looked at me, clearly unsure what to do. Family members pretty serious. I patted his shoulder, about to guide him out, when Mason suddenly stood up. "Sweetheart, I have money too." Christian looked completely puzzled. "Me too." I blinked, then carefully replied, "I know that." The moment I finished speaking, Christian pressed down on my shoulder and turned me around, lowering his voice. "Does Mason really think you're going to go back to your ex? He's got serious jealousy issues. How come we never noticed this before? Back when the two of you were dating, no matter how late you stayed out, he always came to pick you up, never a single complaint. By the way, there was one time after a party ended. You walked out with an Omega leaning on you, chatting closely for ages. Mason had already arrived and was just standing by the car door watching you. Anyone could tell that Omega had feelings for you. Honestly, I was so nervous I almost felt sorry for you. I was drunk that night. Phew, thank goodness you were drunk. Otherwise, I'd have been ready to scold Mason myself. Look, you acted like that back then, and he didn't say a word. You two stayed together for ages after that. So what's going on with him today?" Christian's voice faded into the background. My thoughts began to drift away. That night, Mason was actually upset, but I thought I wouldn't have anything to do with that Omega ever again. So I didn't explain things, I just ended up spending the night with Mason instead. Looking back, it wasn't just that one time. During our relationship, whenever we had disagreements, my usual way of dealing with it was to be physically close. Any frustration would just fade away, like steam rising from sweat and energy. But I didn't realize this approach only worked for me. For Mason, physical closeness might not have eased the emotional distance. It could have actually built up inside him over time. Eventually, it would become something hard to ignore. When he could no longer push it aside, he decided to break things off. I gave myself a light tap on the forehead. The words from Christian were still firing out fast and loud. I was about to manually silence him when a cold, sharp voice came from behind. "Let go." Christian immediately let go and stepped back. I turned around, and Mason suddenly wrapped his arms around me, muttering lowly, "Honey, I've got money, everything's yours. Please don't go." I was overwhelmed with mixed emotions and couldn't speak. Instead, I gently reached up to stroke his back. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Christian smirking at me. "Congrats, brother, you snagged yourself a great husband." I flipped him off with a fake smile. "Get out already, and close the door behind you. Next time you come in without knocking, I'll take your office door off." Christian gave me a playful wink, let out a couple of exaggerated oohs, and strutted away. As the door clicked shut, I cupped Mason's face and kissed him passionately several times. "I'm sorry." Mason frowned at me. His dark eyes flickered with confusion, then realization, and finally a deep sense of disappointment. I didn't get it. "What's wrong?" After a pause, Mason gently extended his index finger and touched a spot just below my left collarbone, asking softly, "Is this from your ex-boyfriend?" I froze for 2 seconds. Then it clicked, and I couldn't help laughing. Mason had seen it last night, but he didn't say anything. I thought he didn't care. Now that I think about it, he seemed to avoid that spot when we were close. So he actually did care. I smiled at him and raised an eyebrow. You're jealous, aren't you? Mason suddenly pulled me into a tight hug. His face lit up with a joy I'd never seen before. After that day, Mason seemed to have realized I liked him. He started becoming more clingy. I needed to stay late to catch up on piled-up work. Mason stayed up with me too. He didn't touch his phone or tablet. Instead, he set up a full set of traditional Chinese writing tools on my desk and started practicing calligraphy. He showed me that mastering handwriting really relies on muscle memory. Mason had been practicing calligraphy since kindergarten, and even though his mind isn't what it used to be, he can still produce work that's nearly as good as a professional teacher's. Within just 2 days, my office was filled with beautiful, pleasing pieces of calligraphy. I felt so proud and quickly filmed a video to share it on my social media. Anthony was the first to like it. Christian dropped by my office and, upon seeing the wall full of calligraphy, couldn't help but admire it, shaking his head in amazement as he said I had a wonderful husband. I'd long since stopped reacting to those 2 words, so I didn't bother responding. When I looked up, I saw him asking Mason to write a piece of calligraphy with the phrase "calmness leads far." Mason glanced at me, and I gave a half-smile, raising one eyebrow slightly. He immediately understood, then turned to Christian and delivered the words with cool indifference. My wife won't allow it. After being turned down, Christian started making sarcastic small talk. Mason, you've been hiding out here at our company almost every other day for self-improvement. What? You don't care about your own business anymore. Mason paused mid-stroke, appearing calm on the surface but internally scrambling. I held back a laugh just as Mason spoke coldly. Mind your own business. All right. That reply was very much Mason. I gave him a quick thumbs up behind his back. Christian was left speechless, but he never let it bother him. He boldly took hold of a calligraphy scroll that read, "Vast virtue bears all. Family thieves are hard to guard against." After work, I remembered the house cook had taken leave and was about to order delivery when Mason said he wanted to try cooking instead. Of course, I supported him, but secretly I'd already planned out exactly what dishes I wanted. To my complete surprise, Mason actually followed the video and cooked a delicious 3-dish and 1-soup meal that looked and smelled amazing. I immediately took a photo with tears in my eyes and posted it on social media. Anthony was the first to like it. The next day was Mason's medical follow-up appointment. After going through the tests, the doctor said the same thing as before, just take it slow. The 2 mothers listened and then linked arms, comforting each other. I didn't really mind. Taking it slow was fine. I wasn't in a rush to begin with. I actually didn't mind at all if Mason stayed this way forever. After all, I could protect him for the rest of my life. After the checkup, both mothers hurried back to their respective companies. Samuel and Mason went to the old master's hospital room. I had planned to stay longer and talk, but he didn't want us to linger. He chuckled and gently suggested that I take Mason out for some fun whenever I had time. That was exactly what I'd been thinking too. So for the next 3 days, I started working overtime again to free up time for a week-long trip with Mason to Elk Country. The day we left was perfectly sunny, and after arriving at the airport, I took a photo of the sunrise. After posting it to my social feed, I instinctively hoped the old master would like it. But after waiting 20 minutes, there was no response at all. That felt unusual. Grandfather used to like posts instantly. I stared at my phone for about 3 minutes. A strange sense of unease welled up inside me. I was hesitating whether to make a call. My phone rang. It was Mason. After answering, a slightly worried voice came through. "Hi, Mason, it's Mom." "Yeah, Mom. Have you and Samuel boarded the plane yet?" "Not yet. Grandpa, he's not doing well. I rushed to the ward with Mason, and the elderly man was reaching out toward the phone on the bedside table. Luna grabbed it away in one quick motion. Dad, the doctor said you need to rest. You just now almost didn't make it. Suddenly, the old man coughed hard. Luna turned instantly, her eyes still reddened, and quickly adjusted her expression. Here you are. Come on in. I gently pushed Mason, but he wouldn't budge. He'd been stunned senseless after that phone call. He hadn't come back to himself yet. I cupped his face and rubbed it firmly. Grandpa's awake. Let's go in and sit with him. Okay? After a long pause, Mason gave the slightest nod, gripping my hand so tightly it was trembling. The atmosphere grew heavy. Mason slowly walked over and knelt beside the old man's bed. Luna and I exchanged a glance, then quietly stepped back outside the room. Mom, what did the doctor say? Luna paused for a moment, glanced at me briefly, then slowly looked away. The doctor said it could happen within the next few days. Grandpa did this on purpose, sent Mason away, didn't he? After a long silence, Luna spoke in a trembling voice. Mason's father passed away early. At the time, I almost didn't make it through myself. I was lost for so long. Mason was raised mostly by his grandfather. The old man wanted me to tell a lie to comfort Mason, so he wouldn't be too heartbroken, but I just couldn't do it. Luna's voice cracked as she began to cry. I stepped forward and gently wrapped my arms around her. Mom, you did the right thing. Half an hour later, Mason pushed open the hospital room door with a dazed expression and walked toward me, struggling to speak. Sweetheart, Grandpa said he wants to talk to you. I gently touched his face, then turned and walked into the room. The elderly man broke into a warm smile as soon as he saw me. I turned my head, took a deep breath, adjusted my expression, then walked to the bedside and smiled. Grandpa, what would you like to talk about? The old man took my hand and gave it a reassuring pat. Samuel, thank you for taking such good care of Mason. I had just started to speak when the old man waved his hand. I can tell Mason has been truly happy these past few days, happier than he's ever been while staying with me. I pressed my lips together and spoke sincerely. But you've raised him to be truly outstanding. The old gentleman looked at me, half sighing, half smiling. I've always been strict with him, pushing him to take on responsibilities early. He became outstanding, but his personality grew rigid and dull, hardly someone people would naturally like. I actually kind of like that side of him. Is that so? The old gentleman suddenly turned to look at me. So, you're saying it was Mason who ended things? I froze for a moment, my eyes widening slightly. You know about me and him? The old man gave a soft nod with a smile. All right then. I made a little pout. Yeah. And he said something about giving me my freedom back. The old gentleman paused for a few seconds before asking, Want to know why? I nodded. The elder smiled and patted my hand. Samuel, you're just too easy to like. Before I could respond, he sighed and continued on his own. Mason is like a quiet tree, but you're like the free wind. He always hopes you'll come, yet feels he can never keep you around. Can't hold on. I was speechless. That night, the clueless Mason said almost the same thing to me. I looked up and gave a wry smile. Grandpa, does that mean I made him feel insecure? The elder laughed out loud and teased. You'll have to ask the old Mason about that. After a long silence, I let out a soft sigh with a smile. Grandpa, how do you know everything? The old man picked up his phone and gave it a little shake. Social media is a helpful thing. Looking back now, The old man seemed to have a sudden burst of energy that morning, as if he were experiencing one last moment of clarity. After cheerfully saying goodbye to everyone, his vitality faded noticeably and quickly. Mason stayed by the bedside without sleep or rest for 2 days straight. The old man hadn't taken in any food or drink, and neither did Mason. He said nothing and shed no tears, sitting there like a silent statue. It wasn't until the early hours of the third day that the old man passed away with a peaceful smile. When I went to support him, I finally heard his voice, hoarse and filled with deep sorrow. The funeral hall remained set up for 3 days. On the day of the old man's burial, Mason seemed like a hollow shell with all spirit drained away. After the burial ceremony, relatives and friends gradually left the cemetery. Mason stood at the entrance of the steps like a lone pine tree, gazing back for a long time. I asked my dad to take the two moms home first. I stayed about 2 steps away from Mason, watching with him. The weather forecast said it would rain today. As the sky grew darker, Mason showed no sign of moving. I sighed silently, then pulled out my phone to call someone to bring an umbrella. Right after I connected the call, I heard a sudden thud from behind. I quickly turned around and saw Mason had fallen down. Fell down? I rushed to follow, but my legs felt like they were filled with iron, completely unresponsive. So I could only lurch forward like someone disabled, helplessly watching Mason roll faster and faster. Samuel shouted, "Mason!" The only response was a dull thud. Mason's head hit against a stone pillar. I wasn't sure what was wrong with Mason, so I rushed him to the hospital without delay. After a full examination, the doctor said there were no serious issues besides exhaustion, and the back of Mason's head just had a small bump. The recommended treatment was simply, let him rest. He really did need to sleep. Once he lay down, it was like he'd entered a deep state of stillness. I stayed by his side the whole time, too worried to sleep, afraid that, if I did, he might never wake up. I went to see the doctor every 3 hours. By early morning on the 3rd day, I was completely worn out. I gently tugged Mason's ear and tried to negotiate with him. "Mason, I'll just take a quick nap. Promise you'll stay alert. Wake me up when you're done." "Okay." After saying that, I gave his nose a little pinch, felt reassured, then curled up beside his hand and was out in seconds. I ended up sleeping so deeply it felt like time had vanished. I had no idea what time it was at all. When I suddenly jolted awake, I realized it was already evening. I scrambled upright, feeling around in every direction, and realized I was lying in bed. Was I on the bed? But where was the patient? "Mason Muyuan." Here came a calm, detached voice. I stared blankly in the direction of the sound and saw Mason sitting back on the sofa. His hair was neatly trimmed, his face freshly shaved, the hospital gown replaced with a tailored suit, and his tie perfectly straightened. Most importantly, his expression had changed dramatically, sharp and focused, deep and unreadable, with no trace of dullness left. I couldn't hold back the tears welling up in my eyes, my voice trembling with emotion. You're better now, aren't you?" "Yeah," Mason replied calmly. I jumped off the bed in an instant, about to run toward him, when he spoke slowly and evenly. "Samuel, you've been through a lot lately." My step froze mid-motion, the tears forced back with effort. "What did you just say?" Mason remained completely composed, picking up a document from the armrest and laying it flat on the small coffee table in front of him. "Let's get divorced." Fine. The first thing after regaining clarity was cutting ties with me. I wanted to laugh from frustration, nearly turned to leave, but then felt strangely confused and stopped. So I turned back and spoke as calmly as I could. Reason. Mason kept his eyes half lowered. First, put your shoes on. What kind of nonsense is that? I'm asking for the reason. Why are we divorcing? Don't talk about giving me freedom. I already have my own freedom now. Mason remained still with his gaze down. After 2 seconds, he rose and walked to stand before me, picked up the nearby slippers, knelt halfway, took hold of my ankle, and slipped them on for me. After finishing, he didn't get up, still in that half-kneeling position. He looked up and said quietly, I know why you married me. Now that grandfather is gone, it's time for you to return to your own life. Return to your own life. What kind of talk is that? I was so angry I couldn't speak. I ran my hands through my hair in frustration, grabbed Mason's collar, and pulled him up. You don't know anything. I just want to ask you, do you still love me? Mason looked straight at me, calm and steady. After a long pause, he looked away. I love you, but stop. I gently held his jaw and turned his face toward mine. Now it's your turn. Ask me. Ask. Mason's calm, composed gaze finally showed a hint of emotion. His throat moved as he swallowed hard, and under my intense stare, he finally spoke. Do you still love me? Yes. I love you so much. Loved you before we broke up. Loved you even while angry after the breakup. I married you first because of my feelings for you, and only secondly because of Grandpa. Did you hear that clearly? Mason seemed stunned by my outburst. After a long moment, he came back to himself, letting out a faint, wry smile. But I don't really think I'm someone worth loving. Now it was my turn to be stunned, staring at him in disbelief. Then, what made you think I agreed to date you in the first place? Was it because you kept chasing me until I finally gave in? Mason said nothing. I let out a soft sigh, lowering my tone. Mason, I don't know how you came to that conclusion, but if you're unsure in your heart, there's another way to say it. You could just ask me. Samuel, what do you love about me? The man in front of me slowly lifted his eyes, as if returning to the same clueless version of Mason I knew. After a long pause, he finally spoke up, nervous and hesitant. Samuel, what do you love about me? I let out a small laugh, then walked over to the sofa and plopped down casually, chin slightly raised as I spoke with confidence. I love your good looks and great build, your wealth and drive, your thoughtfulness, patience, and reliability. I love your amazing cooking skills, your calm attitude, and even that strange possessiveness you sometimes show. That's not just occasional. Mason paused, his expression suddenly darkening. I'm always this possessive. I can't stand anyone getting close to you. I raised one eyebrow slightly and nodded. All right, then let me rephrase. I love your constant need to have me all to yourself. I smiled and went on. There's one more thing I've thought deeply about lately. I admit, I used to be too careless with boundaries. But could you forgive me this time? From now on, my shoulder will only be for you to rest on. My hand will only hold yours, and sweet words will only be spoken to you. I won't go to any events if you're not there or don't approve. I'll always come home by 9 at the latest, with special cases handled specially. All right? And the most important part, if we ever have a disagreement, I won't use intimacy to fix things anymore. Whether it's talking or arguing, any issue will be settled the same day, and then after that we can reconnect. Mason's body tensed slightly, his expression a little blank. I snapped my fingers. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Mason stared at me for a long time, took one step forward but then paused, lowering his eyes as he spoke softly. I'm really boring. After a moment of silence, I nodded. True. Mason's body tensed for a brief instant, then slowly lifted his eyes, his throat bobbing slightly. So, cut the dramatics, I interrupted, my tone turning serious. Do you really think being boring and loving you are contradictory? Let me tell you, absolutely not. In other words, because I love you, your quiet steadiness becomes a kind of strength in my eyes. And since that makes me feel unsteady myself, I need someone steady like you. After hearing those words, Mason's expression eased up slightly, and he began to look at me with what felt like a long, lingering gaze. I knew there was more he wanted to say, but I didn't push. Instead, I casually picked up the divorce papers from the coffee table and started flipping through them. Just as I opened the cover, I heard him speak. Samuel, we can't truly mark each other. I paused for a moment, then lifted my head and studied him briefly with half-lidded eyes. Mason. If you could mark me but I don't love you, do you really think you could keep me tied to you for life? Mason didn't say anything, but the faint shimmer in his eyes told me he understood what I meant. I stood up, opened my arms, and waited for him to come forward. Mason turned his head slightly to hold back tears, then stepped forward with firm strides. Just as I was about to embrace him, he suddenly bent down and grabbed the 2 divorce papers, tearing them into pieces again and again, until they were completely torn beyond repair. He crumpled them tightly in both hands and threw them forcefully into the trash bin. He didn't spare the pen sitting on the coffee table either. There was a sharp clack sound. The pen was done, but it looked so expensive. Just as I reached to pick it up, Mason suddenly wrapped his arms around me, tight and fierce. Samuel, are you really willing to stay by my side forever? I let out a soft laugh, then struggled to free one arm before looping it around his neck. I think that question should wait until our wedding day, but I want to ask it now. All right, I do. Mason said nothing. I couldn't see his expression, but I could feel the shaky breath, the racing heartbeat, the arms tightening around me, and big drops of tears falling onto my collar. I murmured with a smile, Mason, did you shake the leaves onto me because you're happy? The person holding me paused for a beat. Then he let go, cupped my face with both hands, and gently kissed me. Yeah, happy. After speaking, Mason took my hand, reached into the side pocket of his suit coat, and pulled out a ring. Samuel, could you put it on me again? I took the ring, slowly lifted his left hand, and spoke in a calm tone. You're moving fast, Mason. Mason pressed his lips together. Sorry. I furrowed my brow. 2 seconds later, Mason understood. His expression eased, a soft smile appearing in his eyes. I love you. I smiled and nodded, sliding the ring to the base of my finger before leaning in to brush my lips against his. That's more like it.